from ScreenJunkies Studios in the heart of Los Angeles, this is ScreenJunkies Movie Fights. Now your host, Andy Signore.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. Hello, guys and dolls. Welcome to a very special edition of Movie Fights. I'm Alicia Malone, filling in for Andy Signore, who's still away on his much-needed vacation. And in his absence, he made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and that is to host and judge classic film fights. That's right, we have turned down the saturation, and frankly, my dears, I hope you do give a damn, because the black and white, Technicolor, and retro films we'll be talking about today are still very important, are highly influential on modern movies, and I know we have a whole bunch of classic film-loving fans out there. So fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a bumpy and very fun night. Let's meet our fighters. Firstly, she's ready for her close-up, Mr. DeMille, from MTV News Chief Film Critic, Amy Nicholson.
Hey, Alicia, you look lovely in black and white.
Why, thank you. It's very flattering. And he's still big. It's the movies that got small from Access Hollywood. Scott Rosebud Mantz.
Rosebud Mantz, I can tell you right now, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be the Citizen Kane of movie fights. It is great to be here. You both look beautiful. All three of you look beautiful in black and white.
Yes, making his debut on Movie Fights. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. He is a film critic from The Wrap, from What the Flick, and his own podcast, Linoleum. I can never say the word. You'll have to say it. Alonso Duralde.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How do you say it again?
A linoleum knife,
Yes.
and I've always wanted to be in black and white, so this is very exciting.
Yay, I'm so glad you could join us. And over there, on the fact-checking count of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, he's fact-checking in ours, Mr. Ken Napzok.
Go Ken!
Leash, it's great to be here. I'm so happy to be filling in for the wonderful Dan Murrell, who is busy as we make our way down to San Diego next week for Screen Junkies Central at San Diego Comic-Con. Join us for that, but I'm here now. Love this, Alicia. Love that you get the opportunity to talk classic films here on Movie Fights.
Me too. So a quick reminder, it's about the arguments. It's not about which film choice I personally love. So be passionate, get creative. Do not rely on the kindness of strangers. And for everyone watching out there, a quick reminder, so for this episode only, for this purposes, we have made the term classic as pre-1980. So we're talking about all films that were released before 1980. So hopefully, if you guys have never seen any old films, you can still enjoy, have fun, maybe get some ideas of some things to watch. Let's get mad as hell and not take it anymore. Roll it, JTE. Well, you can't fight in here. This is a war room. Actually, you can. So let's get into it. Round one. Woo! Woo! So the question is, which is the best classic movie the critics got wrong at the time? We are starting with Amy. Go ahead.
All right, well, as a critic, you live in fear of getting something wrong. You know, you can get something wrong in a lot of ways. A film can be too ambitious, it can look too different, it can be too artsy, it can have an actor or a style you don't understand. But I think one of the worst things that critics can get wrong when we get it wrong is we don't like a movie that is universally beloved, that audiences go and see and they just worship it from the moment they go and check it out. And so for that reason, I am picking It's a Wonderful Life. Now, It's a Wonderful Life is the movie that we watch every Christmas. It is the movie that we have most associated with Christmas from the past. This might be, for a lot of people, one of the first black and white movies they ever saw. Mm-hmm. But critics were so against it when it came out. I mean, the New York Times, or Variety actually called it overlong. They said it was too cloying. And then they dubbed the term Capricorn, this idea of a sentimental picture that's just so sweet that it doesn't work anymore at the times. You know, this is a movie that came out right after World War II, and nobody was in the mood to see, or critics at least were not in the mood to see a movie that was so sweet. So it basically killed Capra's career after this. He made a few films, but critics savaged it so much that he kind of backed away from making films. And this only got resurrected because nobody cared about this movie so much that that the copyright infringement on it, people weren't filing the correct paperwork, which is why they were able to show it on TV for free. And that is how it became so beloved by all of us. So for that reason, just because it's just a film that people really, really, really loved, and it destroyed a lot of future films we could have had from Capra, I'm picking It's a Wonderful Life.
Alrighty, It's a Wonderful Life from Amy. Alonso, you're up.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I think we do worry as critics that we're gonna miss out on something. Bosley Crowther famously resigned from the New York Times after hating Bonnie and Clyde because he realized that he just didn't get it. He didn't get what the kids were about these days, and so he was done with the whole thing. The late '60s, I think, was definitely a period of transition, and so for that reason, I have chosen 2001: A Space Odyssey, a film that you would have think that at least some of the more forward-thinking critics of the time would have been down for. But again, you find a lot of these reviews where people are saying things like, the computers got more of a personality than the astronauts, as though that wasn't Kubrick's point all along. Even the great Pauline Kael referred to it as a shaggy god story. I think this is a movie that people didn't get, but the problem is a lot of times you need to be able to sit on a movie and reflect and sort of figure out its mysteries. I always felt really bad for all the trade critics who saw Tree of Life at Cannes and just immediately had to hammer out 1,000 words about it. You need to let a movie soak in for a while. So 2001, people dismissed it as being overlong and boring and pretentious and full of itself. And obviously with time, we've had a chance to watch it repeatedly to sort of step back and figure out what it's really about. And so I think for that reason, it's a film that has deservedly become part of the American canon, but a lot of critics, when it first came out, just missed the boat, or the spaceship, if you will.
Yeah, I was going to say, open the pod bay doors. How?
Please, how?
Mantz, you're up.
Okay, well, first of all, I never thought I would see the day where I would have to argue against
I know.
2001: A Space Odyssey or It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah. Number 3 on my list, number 2 on my list, but number 1 on my list. Ladies and gentlemen, for everyone who's watching Movie Fights, everyone knows what my pick is going to be. Yes, it is the Citizen Kane of fights. It is the Citizen Kane of answers.
Finally.
Because it is. Yes, Citizen Kane. I am arguing in favor of Citizen Kane because this is a film, when it came out in 1981, it got bad reviews, and not just from William Randolph Hearst. This movie got bad reviews from the Sunday Times, which wrote, I thought the photography was good, but nothing to write Moscow about. The acting, middling, and the whole thing a little dull. Dull? How do you call Citizen Kane dull? Otis Ferguson of the New Republic wrote, the picture is very exciting to anyone who gets excited about how things are done in movies, which is a good thing. And these things, there's no doubt the picture is dramatic, but what goes on in between the dramatic high points, the story? No. What goes on is talk and more talk. What? We're talking about Citizen Kane. This movie changed, with the use of deep focus, the way movies were made, everything about this film, the fragmented, non-linear structure, and the fact that decades later, it was the top of Sight and Sound for 20 years until it was replaced by Vertigo, and then it was number 2. And then on the AFI 100 Years, 100 Movies, it is number 1. It is number 1 or number 2 on every poll. And talk about a movie that destroyed its filmmaker. Citizen Kane peaked with Citizen Kane, or Orson Welles, excuse me, peaked with Citizen Kane. And then, his next film, Magnificent Ambersons, got totally butchered, and he made great films, but he was never the same. And this is a movie that sort of came out right before America's involvement in World War II. So some of the things that Kane said, there'll be no war. It's such a great film. The non-linear structure, Rosebud! All right, I'm done.
Alrighty, so 3 really good films. Now it's up to you guys to tear each other down. Tell me why you think your pick is the best and what you think of the other picks. Go ahead. Open for it.
If you could please stop screaming about Marion Davies' clitoris, that would really help a lot.
I know what he's getting at.
That's where that came from. Anyway, okay.
Rosebud.
I grant you, these are all prime examples, and I even wrote a book about Christmas movies, so I totally grant you that It's a Wonderful Life was a movie that was underappreciated in its time. However, I will say that, it wasn't completely looked over. Both It's a Wonderful Life and Citizen Kane were nominated for multiple Academy Awards. And that is not exactly the most forward-thinking group on Earth. So if the members of the Academy were savvy enough to realize that these movies mattered in things like Best Picture, Best Screenplay, acting in a lot of other different categories, I think that it's safe to say that there was an audience for that film. There was even a critical sort of movie-centric film aware audience that was out there for those films. 2001, really, it was only because people got stoned to watch it that I think that it kind of took off immediately, and it was only later that there was a genuine amount of scholarship devoted to it, and that, you have to remember, Kubrick at the time was not the Kubrick that we think of him now. Only a few films earlier, he was making movies like, Spartacus for Kirk Douglas, so the myth of Kubrick kind of launches with this film, really. After this, we get A Clockwork Clockwork Orange. After this, we get Barry Lyndon and The Shining and whatnot. So I really think that 2001 is a movie that completely went literally over the heads of its audience, and only later came around to where people could understand it.
I think actually a lot of critics got 2001 right. I mean, I side with Renata Adler of the New York Times when she said it was, quote, somewhere between hypnotic and immensely boring. I think she saw it for what it was, and I think they were calling it out a little bit. I mean, to the point of Oscars, I think that is a big deal. And Citizen Kane did get 9 Oscars, more than my poor beloved It's a Wonderful Life.
But I got like, 7 though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
2001 did get nominated. Stanley Kubrick won his only Oscar for the special effects of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
True.
The amazing thing about these 3 films is that it's not that these other 2 movies, like It's a Wonderful Life or 2001, are bad. I love them both immensely. Just Citizen Kane, again, for everyone who is watching this show, everyone knows how I feel about Citizen Kane.
Very passionate.
But this is a film. Okay, for example, on the BBC Culture Poll from 2015, It's a Wonderful Life was number 46. 2001 was number 4. Number 1, yes, you guessed it, Citizen Kane. On the 2016 Sight and Sound, Citizen Kane was number 2. It was the first time that happened because it was toppled over by Vertigo. 2001 was number 6. Wonderful Life didn't even chart at all. And then finally, at the AFI list, 2001 was number 1. Number 15 was Citizen Kane was number 1. 2001 was number 15, and number 20 was It's a Wonderful Life. So in terms of movies that the critics got wrong at the time, the fact that Citizen Kane has been so influential, not just a beloved classic that people watch every holiday, but that has influenced so many filmmakers, influenced generations of filmmakers, and has topped all of these polls higher than the other 2 films. That is why Citizen Kane is the best classic movie that the critics got wrong at the time.
Although you could also argue that if It's a Wonderful Life is not making these polls or is very low in them, critics are still getting it wrong. Maybe critics still are betraying this movie that audiences
are getting it wrong. I would say the people who do these polls are getting it wrong, but the critics, I mean, like now, I mean, I'll go to any theater showing It's a Wonderful Life or 2001: A Space Odyssey or Citizen Kane. When it's showing on the big screen. But I mean, I will drop. I mean, I'm giving you an argument here. I'm supporting your argument, but I will drop whatever I am doing. And I'll be like, 2001's on the big screen, done, I'm there, and yes, I will get high, and I will watch that.
Yay! All right. Thank you, guys. Great arguments. Let's go over to Mr. Napzok. And any fact-checking there?
All looks clean on this end. I would never challenge Mantz on any dates or ranks or lists, but I'm going to try to keep up with him there.
Okay.
Wonderful Life received 5 Academy Award nominations, won 1 for technical achievement. Oh, we all love technical achievement. Everything else. So you guys on Twitter, we love your support already. A lot of you checking in on the hashtag MovieFightsLive, where I'm also monitoring as well as checking facts. Andrew Franklin says, seeing Movie Mantz in black and white just strengthens the David Strathairn comparison. Neil Varma said no one likes Psycho. A lot of people talking about Psycho. And Brian Hurst says, yes, Movie Mantz fights Citizen Kane for every round. Maybe not do that.
Almost did.
Almost did. That was a consideration.
So again, everything else clean. There is a poll. I'll be checking on that in a second.
Okay, well, I love the smell of movie fights in the morning. That was a great round 1. Congratulations. I am going to give it to Alonso because I like the way you said how the other 2 films weren't necessarily completely overlooked at the time given their Oscars, but I do think that everyone should watch all of these 3 films because they're excellent.
That is very true.
Especially on the big screen if you can.
Yes, and yes.
Oh, and one thing about Citizen Kane, if you have the DVD or Blu-ray, you have to watch it with Roger Ebert's commentary.
Oh.
It is the best commentary I've ever heard on any Blu-ray or DVD from a director, filmmaker, critic, anybody, is Roger Ebert's commentary on Citizen Kane. It's fantastic.
I love that tip. I've never seen that.
Rosebud.
Thank you for that. All right, let's get into round 2. So the question is, what classic film star would still be popular today if they were still making movies? Let's start with Alonso.
I went with Greta Garbo because I think that there is something timeless about her as a film presence. There's a saying that, one look from an actor or actress can replace pages and pages of dialogue. And if you look at, say, the ending of Queen Christina, where she was basically directed to stare into the horizon with as blank a face as possible, you look at that shot and you read so much into it. It's, it plays into that whole thing about the Kuleshov effect, where the audience will just fill in all the missing information, when they need to. And, when you look at, say, Tilda Swinton's career right now, who is considered one of our great actresses of this generation, I think she's very much carrying on the same tradition of that sort of enigmatic, androgynous, beautiful blankness in a way. And I don't mean blank as in vapid, but just blank as in being a screen on which the audience is allowed to project their innermost feelings and desires. She, I think, really understood the film camera as somebody who transitioned successfully from silent film to talkies. And I think that her presence would maintain itself even in modern day filmmaking. I think that directors would just shoot her and know exactly what they were getting out of her.
Beautiful woman. Mantz?
Okay, if you want to talk about a beautiful woman, does it get any more beautiful than Marilyn Monroe? No, it doesn't. Alonso, you want to talk about a timeless look where one look can say it all? Marilyn Monroe had that look. She had tremendous sex appeal. No one could top her to this very day. She is an icon in every sense of the word. And talk about someone who the camera absolutely, positively loved. Now, a lot of people may argue that she was just a sex symbol, but in her later films, she proved that she had acting chops. She stood alongside, or she held her own with Clark Gable in The Misfits. But she also, a lot of people think it's easy to play yourself, but it's actually hard to play yourself, and she did a great job doing that in The 7-Year Itch. She was fantastic with Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis in Some Like It Hot, thank you. But that scene where she's standing above the grill in New York City in The 7-Year Itch, that's just one of the iconic moments in movie history that today has never been topped.
So wanted to be her when I was young. Amy, go for it.
You are her, darling.
In my dreams.
I have to go with a very clear answer for me, James Dean. James Dean made 3 movies before he died in a car accident in 1955, and yet we still recognize that face immediately and have cardboard cutouts of him next to Marilyn Monroe on Hollywood Boulevard. Now, James Dean is my pick for one really important reason, which is he isn't just an actor who represents the past. He isn't just an actor that we remember for who he was. He's an actor who launched the way acting is considered today. He is the guy who inspired all of the actors we have working now, James Franco, Nicolas Cage, Heath Ledger, Dane DeHaan, Leonardo DiCaprio. We're always looking for the next James Dean because he did method acting. He lived in the moment, his acting felt fresh and new, and he brought a style of acting that is still the way that we see actors today. I think if he existed in this moment, every casting director in town would be screaming to get him in their movie. Because he has that thing that was just so fresh and relatable for what we want right now. Because what we're talking about isn't just like who's a great actor or who was a signature presence. We're talking about who would be as popular, and that means who would be as castable, who would be as sought after for roles, who would be as beloved by fans. And that's clearly James Dean, because he is that actor you could just pop out of these movies, put today, and we would still go, wow.
So dreamy. I love him. All right, open for him.
Okay.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go. Now, Amy. Why am I talking like William Shatner? I don't know. But I want to talk about, listen, I agree with you. James Dean, and by the way, he was number 2 on my list. Greta Garbo, never even thought about her, but I love them both. Again, it's like with the other movie. By the way, how did I lose a Citizen Kane argument? How did I fuck that up?
I don't know.
Okay, moving on. But Marilyn Monroe, listen, James Dean inspired the likes of DiCaprio. James Franco won an Emmy, a Golden Globe for playing James Franco. And yes, Nicolas Cage, that brooding rebel without a cause. But he has been imitated. He has been, he has influenced other actors. Marilyn Monroe has never been equaled. She's never been topped. We've never seen anyone like Marilyn Monroe since Marilyn Monroe. No one has even come close. So for Marilyn Monroe to be making movies today, and by the way, you watch her films, especially like restored, in high definition, like movies that look like they could have been shot today, no one looks like her. No one acts like her. No one sounds like her. I mean, she is just She was great then. She's great now in the spiritual sense and in the cinematic sense.
But see, here's the problem. Like, that's a really great argument for why Marilyn Monroe is a unique movie star, is an inimitable new movie star. But we're talking about somebody who can translate to today. And I love Marilyn Monroe. I love her. I love her. A Gentleman for Blondes is the one I want everybody to go home
sure.
and watch.
Me
Yes.
too.
Yep.
That's my favorite. She gets to be so funny in that movie. But the problem is that I feel like Marilyn Monroe can't be popped out of her movies and put into any movies today. We don't make movies the way that Marilyn Monroe had to star in movies back then.
That's why she'd be hot today.
It'd be great, but it'd be hard. I'm thinking about all of the movies that came out this year, and I'm trying to imagine Marilyn Monroe playing a female role in any of them. We don't really make movies that show off who she was.
But if
and so
Marilyn
I
Monroe-
don't feel like we could have her.
Go ahead.
Okay, here's why you're both wrong. Marilyn Monroe is great, and yes, Gentleman for Blondes is one of the great movies of all time, and she's exquisite in it. If Marilyn Monroe were working today, every casting director in Hollywood would say, you're too fat.
Yeah.
That is the sad
Probably.
truth. She is gorgeous and voluptuous and created a standard of beauty. By 21st century Hollywood standards, they would tell her she was too fat.
Disagree.
And that is a
Disagree.
that is a damnation of Hollywood and not of Marilyn Monroe. As for James Dean, I think you give him too much credit as far as setting the whole method thing in motion. Really, Brando did that with The Men, which was before James Dean made his screen debut. And I think that we found as the decades passed, the people who were the hardcore Strasbergians, which includes Dean and Monroe, did not age well into acting styles. Look at the later career of Shelley Winters. Look at the later career of Brando. These are people who were not fitting into changing styles of acting, to changing styles of movies. And by the 21st century, if those guys were alive and working, they would have been shipped out to television or the outer fringes of the business. I don't think that either of them
That is
disagree.
so patently
Completely
untrue.
disagree.
I can't even wrap my head around it. And B, I like that you're picking on like two people who had very public, strange meltdowns. You know, that's a lot of why their careers took strange turns, not their acting.
And what do you think
What
about Greta?
meltdown did Shelley Winters have? She got older and she got larger.
say?
But
First
she
of all,
never had, like,
What about you two think about Greta Garbo?
Well, here's the thing. I can't imagine that we could have that many actresses today with Greta Garbo's Swedish accent working in Hollywood. I think that'd be really tough for her to
tell it
pull
to
off.
Alicia Vikander.
I think Alicia Vikander is really good at losing her accent. I think Greta Garbo struggled with it. And also, here's the main reason why I think Greta Garbo could not be as popular today. This is the actress who famously wanted to be alone. We live in a social media era where we expect our actors to be out, shaking hands, getting their pictures taken. Greta Garbo, not only would she reject all of that, I think she'd even refuse to act in the civilization that we have today.
I think
she could
if somebody
handle it.
tried to be Garbo in today's civilization, today's sort of media bubble, we wouldn't be able to get enough of that because no one does it. No one is willing to say, you know what, I'm not going to tweet. I'm not going to show you my lunch on Instagram. And I think people would go bananas for it, and they would make them more popular than ever.
If you're going to talk about social media here, Marilyn Monroe would have like 1 billion freaking Twitter followers
Instagram,
overnight.
for sure.
Overnight, for sure. And the thing is, okay, you said you couldn't see Marilyn Monroe in a film today. The first thing I thought about when I was writing down my answer, and I didn't write the answer down, I didn't write this movie down when I was typing out my response here, was I could totally see her playing alongside Leonardo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street, a movie where Margot Robbie exuded sexuality but also gave a superb performance. That's the kind of actress that I think moviegoers and movie makers would see Marilyn Monroe as today, because she
and Martin
is one
Scorsese would
kind
say she's too fat.
she was not too fat. She was healthy. She was voluptuous.
I'm not telling you that I think she's fat. She's perfect. I'm
She
saying,
is
I'm saying-
absolutely
I'm saying
perfect.
Today's
You
Hollywood,
said it yourself.
No, today's
Don't
Hollywood would say, sorry, you're too fat.
All right,
Okay,
Amy, final word.
That's one to pick out. Wolf of Wall Street is great because I do love Margot Robbie, but we're talking about one movie out of in the last 4 years. And
The Legend of Tarzan.
I know. Can you imagine
Margot
Marilyn Monroe in this Tarzan movie? No, not at all. Also, if we're talking about popularity, just picture what Tumblr would do with James Dean. They would go nuts. They would love him. We're talking
He
about
would
a
be
guy who
Robert
was.
Pattinson, after 2 years, they'd be sick of him and moving
We're talking
on.
about a guy who really instituted teenagers in teenage films. This is a guy whose youth is so relatable today. When people, if you go back and watch,
Only because he died while he was still young.
no,
Okay.
you go back and watch Rebel with Cause. If anybody out there does, you're gonna be like,
Terrible,
I want that guy in every
overrated
movie
performance.
now. Not at all.
Calling it. Ken, I'm so sorry. I forgot to check in about the poll on the previous
You
The
did,
previous
but
one.
it's okay. It's okay. And that
What
poll
was it?
went
Who was
to
the winner?
2001: Space Odyssey. So the
Hey!
internet
They
agreed with you there.
They agree with me.
I'll give you the results after you make your decision here. All facts look clean. Just some stuff. And AFI in 1999 did their greatest stars of classic Hollywood cinema for male and females. Greta Garbo ranked 5th on the list. James Dean 18th on the list. None of our business, but Marilyn Monroe was 5'5". Studio claims she was 37, 23, 36. Margot Robbie 34, 23, 34. If we're keeping track of it. On Twitter, hashtag #MovieFightsLive. You guys, I'm so happy to see you guys joining this conversation.
Yay.
And there's so many classic film fans out there. Alicia, you're going to be so happy here.
Okay.
Jesse Stillwell says, easy answer, Steve McQueen. Isaac Horvat says, you daddy rats. The answer is James Cagney. Jack Shipley is going with Errol Flynn. Randall Sands says Audrey Hepburn. Tyler Myers, Cary Grant. A lot of people checking in with Cary Grant as their choice. And Will O at Who is Willow says Peter Lorre, because character actors are the thing right now. And Andrew Winter wants to fight you, Mantz. He says, really, Monroe? I'm sorry, it's Ingrid Bergman.
Wow, there you go.
There you go.
Another
So
good
many choices. So many choices. So many great points there. And you know what? Love means that you never have to say that you're sorry. But I am sorry, Alonso and Mantz, because I'm giving the point to Amy.
Amy.
Because I really liked the way you said how James Dean has inspired a lot of actors. You can definitely see that with James Franco. And I can imagine him being the internet's boyfriend if he was still around today.
He's no Ryan
Absolutely.
He's much better than Ryan
think he
Gosling.
is.
And he's no Marilyn Monroe.
I love Greta and I love Marilyn, obviously. So let's get to round 3. This question is a great one. What is the one classic movie that is a must-see for any film fan? Scott, we're starting with you.
Okay,
and you're not
well,
going to say Citizen Kane.
I'm not going to say Citizen Kane, although when I was typing up my answers, I did say Citizen Kane, but I moved it down because I couldn't make every answer about Citizen Kane, even though I wanted to.
Yes.
I really, really wanted to, and you know that, my friends. Okay, so the movie that the classic film that every movie fan has to see, 1939's The Wizard of Oz. You've been quoting The Wizard of Oz since we walked in the door, Alicia Malone.
Yes.
It is a highly quotable movie. It is so great on every level that it has been spoofed a million times. It has influenced musicals and big production values in the decades that have followed, and still to this day, the production values of this movie are incredible. It's a road trip movie. It is a coming-of-age movie. It is a movie about a great villain, the Wicked Witch. It's fun. It's funny. It has a big heart. No pun intended. It's scary. The flying monkeys. You know, Dorothy was just the quintessential character, you know, and just somewhere over the rainbow, the music. There is so much, my pretties, to The Wizard of Oz, and I'm melting because it's so hot in here.
It is
so
hot in
there you
here.
go, The Wizard of Oz.
And those monkeys, bloody scary when I was young.
They're still scary.
Ooh. Amy, go for it.
I am going with Charlie Chaplin's 1936 movie, Modern Times. Now, people recognize Chaplin instantly. You can put on a mustache and a little bowler hat and everybody knows you're in costume as Chaplin, but I bet there are people who haven't had a chance to watch a Charlie Chaplin film and actually see who the man was that we still recognize as the Tramp. You know, the thing with Modern Times is that the Tramp is probably the definitive silent movie icon. You know, and he made this film actually after people were doing sound movies, but he still kept it mostly silent because he was a silent creation. And when you if you go back and watch Modern Times, what you're doing is you are getting a crash course in what silent films were really about, why they're still valuable, what makes them so fascinating to watch, and you're getting a movie that is still incredibly relatable. Modern Times is set during the Depression, so people can understand what the Depression was while watching it, get a feel for the tone of it. But the things that he's looking at, mechanization, factory work, these are all still touchstones that we have today. So you're getting a film that works in the past and also is so great in the present. And I just think that this is a film where if people weren't sure they would into silent films, or they weren't sure they would like them, they would watch this and it would just open up a door. And you would say, I can't believe that you can get this much laughter out of a film with no talking.
Yes, love that movie. That's a good one to start for silent film fans. Get in there. Alonso.
Well, I agree with you that silent film is important and that more people should go back to the beginnings of cinema to really find out where so many of the ideas that would pop up in later movies came from. But I'm going to go a little further back to 1927 and F.W. Murnau's classic Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans. This is one of the last films to be made before Hollywood went all talking all the time. And you get such a taste of where cinema might have gone if they'd had another year or two to just go crazy visually without having to lock down the camera with that goddamn microphone coming out of the ceiling. This movie is so incredibly beautiful. It's one of those, every frame is something you could put on the wall. It's a haunting, beautiful love story. And, when you talk about Citizen Kane, which is admittedly, obviously, one of the great films of all time.
Yes, it is.
But Wells himself talks about how much he was influenced by the German Expressionists. And the German Expressionists, Murnau was one of the great ones. And when he came to Hollywood and had the resources of Hollywood behind him and Fox to make a film at, he'd left UFA, he created just these incredible, huge city sets filled with people and filled with just things happening and the frames being filled with dancers and stuff, but at the same time he could just have a shot of the two leads, and it's just the most hauntingly gorgeous thing you've ever seen. And we're talking about classics, and I think it's really important because so often people will get into the movies that were released in their own lifetime and think that's where cinema was invented. And you start working backwards and seeing where things happening. And I think Sunrise is a launching pad for so much of the visual style of later on, so much of the cinematography that people like Wells would be influenced by, and that just cinema in general. It is this amazing tipping point and a haunting, unforgettable film.
That is so beautiful.
Nothing
and I have
towers.
to say,
Yes.
I'm having the best time.
Yes.
Open forum.
Here we go.
I'm having the worst time because I love all of these movies, and I have to go make arguments against
How do I
them.
lose a Citizen Kane argument? How do I have to argue against 2001: A Space Odyssey? I mean,
It's all about
this
you,
is
man.
torture, Alicia
I'm
Malone.
sorry,
This is torture
but go
in
for
the
it.
best possible way, because both of your films are great. They are must-see films for their reasons, but The Wizard of Oz towers over those films as a must-see movie because of what it did at the time in 1939. The acting, the sets, the costumes, the special effects, the tornado, this transition from black and white into color. You watch that film today, and it is still like it's chill-inducing by today's standards. It's such a wow moment when she opens the door, and it's a glorious Technicolor. And this is a film that with the music, there's so many great songs to it, and the production values of this film, the sets, the matte paintings, the models, the flying monkeys. I mean, this is way before CGI. Look what they pulled off back then. Look at how much all the production values of Hollywood movies
And what about
in the
these two?
50s, and it just has more of the elements of film that were utilized in the, what is it, check me on the math on this, I'm bad with math, as you all know, 70 years since The Wizard of Oz. Methods that were influenced much more by The Wizard of Oz than by Sunrise and by modern times.
Here's my problem with that, which is, you're right, The Wizard of Oz is incredibly influential, and that's, to me, that's the problem. Because I think if a person hadn't watched that many old movies, they went back and watched The Wizard of Oz, they're like, oh, it's a big fantasy spectacular. Like a lot of the stuff I see today.
Exactly.
That's the problem with
That's
it, though.
my point.
Because they're saying, oh, they made movies like the ones I like today, where girls go on adventures in the past, and they wouldn't be learning about the range of what cinema has to offer. To me, that disqualifies Wizard of Oz, because
that doesn't disqualify it.
It's too
It
familiar, and you're
solidifies
not
my
learning
argument.
about
The Wizard of Oz
the world.
is one of the most quoted movies in other movies ever
Exactly.
made, but that in and of itself does not make it. That's not what the question here is. The question is, what's a film that film lovers should absolutely see? And I think that film lovers, if they truly love movies and not just the sort of experience and the razzle dazzle of it all, they really need to understand the language and the poetry and the visual artistry of cinema. And I think that going back to more now takes that because here's the thing: The Wizard of Oz did not spring out of Zeus's head. It already comes from an established tradition of filmmaking language and of cinematographic choices that earlier filmmakers helped establish. Murnau, I think, was really pioneering in a lot of ways and created a lot of this stuff, and admittedly so did Chaplin. And if you'd said City Lights, I'd have a harder time arguing with you, but Modern Times, less so.
Murnau was Elvis. The Wizard of Oz is the Beatles.
But also,
I was waiting for the reference.
I mean,
That's my token reference to the Beatles for this show.
I love Sunrise. I love it. In fact, my podcast, The Canon, we did a whole Sunrise episode, and my co-host, Devin Fracci, hated it and said it was boring, and my head just exploded.
Oh my God.
I wanted to murder her. This is a movie that has a drunk pig. Drunk pig. If that doesn't sell you on watching Sunrise, drunk pig. But here's the thing. Here's my problem with Sunrise. You're watching this as your gateway into old movies, and you're like, oh, okay, there's, F.W. Murnau, who I love, The Last Laugh is great, and there's, like, Janet Gaynor, who went on to have an okay career, and George O'Brien, who kind of didn't, and you're getting exposure to some people who are really important and some people who are kind of meh, You're not.
And so what? Paulette Goddard? You really need an entryway to her?
But
she made like 2 movies of note. Come on.
But what's special about Modern Times is you're watching a film where Chaplin is the producer, writer, director, and star. You're learning about the range of everything he accomplished in one film, and you have incredibly iconic visual moments in Modern Times too.
Exactly.
You have the assembly line thing with the wrenches. Like there are some naughty jokes in this assembly line. I want to sell people instead of haven't seen it. There's a minute where he's definitely sexually harassing men and women with wrenches. It's so
There's a very
funny.
sexy other woman from the city in Sunrise who and a potential murder.
But if you're talking
Sexy
about
witch.
the technique, like techniques that were used in both Sunrise and Modern Times, those are great, but they were taken to another level. So true film fans who have watched anything from the last 70 years are going to find those influences more from The Wizard of Oz, and that is why a true film fan should see where a lot of these techniques started, which is from The Wizard of
Alrighty,
Oz.
final thoughts. Go
That's
for
my
it,
final
Amy.
thought.
My final thought is I want people to see Sunrise, but I think that's the movie they see 3 films after they see Modern Times. I think they see Modern Times and they're like, whoa, there's a whole world I want to explore of classic films. And then they get to Sunrise eventually and they're like, okay. But you need to be primed by something that's really funny, relatable, awesome, charming, and has the greatest iconic silent film star of all time.
I think you see Sunrise, it's moving, it's gorgeous, and you realize how much of film language that you take for granted or assume was invented by the Wachowskis dates back to the late 1920s.
Woo! I love these arguments. It's going to be hard to make a choice. Ken, I forgot the poll again. What was the results from the previous time?
That's all
I'm
right.
sorry, I'm not used to the polls.
New habit,
Yeah.
and the internet shows James Dean. So you're 2 for 2 with the internet
wow.
today.
Phew.
And we do have a poll, so I'll let that gestate for a little bit there. Mantz, Dateline, 1939. The Wizard of Oz was in theaters 77 years ago.
77, okay.
77. And speaking of Modern Times, it has a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So, take that for what it is. Diego Pazos checking in. He wants 12 Angry Men to be the choice. Modern Spectacle. Says Rear Window without a doubt. Brian Whitmore has 2 choices for us. The Best Years of Our Lives and Black Narcissus. Tom Zambino might go, he wants to go with The Godfather. A lot of people asking where was The Godfather. Robbie Jones has got to be Jaws. Something maybe could someone consider modern-ish classic. 41 years ago, though. So, and Colin Muir says a movie you taught me to love, Alicia, Casablanca.
Yeah, I love that movie. So, Ken, this is a tough choice. Based on the arguments, are you leaning towards anyone in particular?
I'm leaning towards you to go with your heart.
You just don't
Good
want to make a
answer,
choice.
Ken.
This is tough because I said Andy's catchphrase. I didn't mean that. But they're all such great choices. I hope that everyone sees all these films and you all made fantastic points. What we've got here is a failure to communicate, except for Scott Mantz, because you win this round.
Yay!
I'm going with Scott because I like the way, it's so hard because you can say that, yes, the Wizard of Oz came from a lot of like German Expressionism and the silent films, but I like the way you said it took it to another level and it's razzle-dazzle, and I think it's probably an easy film for people to watch if they've never seen any classic films. But that being said, fantastic choices, and please watch Sunrise, please watch Modern Times, because they are really entertaining. And Wizard of Oz. What are people saying online?
Alicia, you are 3 for 3. A lot of people choosing Wizard of Oz, which might just prove that more people need to watch Modern Times and Sunrise, maybe. I don't know. We'll
maybe.
see.
Or maybe people need to watch Citizen Kane.
Yes, I think they will definitely watch Citizen Kane after
the
this.
show.
All right, we're up to round 4. Ding ding. I should probably check in with the scoreboard before we get into the question. We are 1-1 at the moment, so 1 point for each.
Sudden
It's
death.
anyone's game at this point. 2 more rounds before we move to the speed round. Round 4 is, what is the most influential film on modern day movies? So slightly different twist on the last question. Starting with Amy. Go for it.
I am going with John Ford's 1956 movie, The Searchers, starring John Wayne. And I'm going for it for 2 really specific different reasons. One, John Wayne, I'll give like the quickest plot summary for people who haven't seen it. Watch this movie, by the way. John Wayne plays
1956?
1956.
Yeah.
Hey.
John Wayne plays a man whose niece is kidnapped by the Comanches, and he sets out to pursue her, and the quest takes years. By the time he gets towards the end of it, where he's getting closer and closer to finding her, he realizes he might have to kill her at this point because she's disgraced the family by being accepted as part of the tribe. The character he plays in this is racist, sexist, misogynistic, a jerk, and also the hero of the film. And so part of why I'm arguing this, reason one, is because this is the movie where you really see the launch of anti-hero movies. This is where you get from this character that John Wayne plays in The Searchers, it's like a direct line to modern day Batman, Breaking Bad. The idea that audiences could love a character or care about him and his quest, even while he's doing completely dark things. And the second reason I'm going for The Searchers is visual. This was a movie that was hugely influential for all of the directors that we love today. Spielberg would rewatch this movie while he was making his own movies. On the set of Close Encounters, he watched The Searchers twice. Scorsese said that this was one of his favorite movies as well. And when you watch The Searchers for the first time, if you've never seen it, you're going to see every movie you love today referred in this. They're coming straight from it. Without it, we wouldn't have films like Taxi Driver. When you watch the ending of the War of the Worlds, Spielberg's War of the Worlds, it is straight from The Searchers. If you've ever seen a Western movie or any movie where you have a shot of somebody inside of a dark house and you see the world outside of it through the window or the door, and then somebody walks through that door, that's from The Searchers. So much of our visual language comes straight from this film, and so that's why it's got to be the pick.
That's one of my favorite things about classic films. When you watch them, you're like, oh, this is where everything came from. I get it. Alonso, you're up.
Boy, I wish The Searchers had more of a footprint on modern day films. I think after the 70s, it kind of stopped, unfortunately. I selected Rocky because, ironically enough, for a movie...
JT is happy in there.
Ironically enough, for a movie in which the hero title character loses the big title fight, that ending so elated audiences and had them so excited and leaping to their feet that the norm became in Hollywood, endings had to be happy. After a brief shining moment of the 70s where heroes might die, where, John Huston gets to take away his daughter/granddaughter in Chinatown, whatever kind of grim thing you wanted to do, out the window, happy endings, happy endings, happy endings. And you look at movies now, and even when the story is set up that the hero is going to sacrifice himself for the greater good, there's always a loophole so that he's not really dead. I point you to any Tom Cruise vehicle of the last 5 years, specifically Oblivion and Edge of Tomorrow. We are so hooked on the happy ending in today's movies that you can go into any film, and unless it is like some scrappy indie or a foreign movie, you pretty much know that it's all going to work out okay, and that the name above the title is going to walk off of Act 3 unscathed. It's a sad state of affairs. I miss knowing how things were going to work out, but this is how corporate films get made now. They have to end happily. They have to leave the audience feeling like there's justice in the world and that, right wins out and all that stuff. And I blame Sylvester Stallone, even though he did it in a movie where the hero loses.
Adrian! Go, Max.
All right, first of all, I just want to say for the record here, JTE, you have not seen Rocky until you've seen the original version that starred Arnold Schwarzenegger as Rocky Balboa. Come on, JT, let's go here. All right, no, this is not for a past movie fight. I'm sorry, I won't subject you to it. The question is this. What is the most influential film on modern day movies? That is today. That is movies from the last 40 years. And what movie is more influential? What movie changed Hollywood for better or worse, more than Star Wars. Nothing. In the years that followed, in the years that immediately followed Star Wars, you had films like Moonraker, James Bond in Space, it was Star Wars. The Black Hole, Disney's first PG-rated movie, was their version of Star Wars. Star Trek the Motion Picture was supposed to be Star Trek's version of Star Wars, but what it really was Star Trek's version of 2001: A Space Odyssey. But I digress. But to this very day, Star Wars has influenced the way movies are made. Every studio wants that big blockbuster. Jaws was the first blockbuster, but Star Wars took the term blockbuster to another level. When people hear the word blockbuster, they think of Star Wars. This summer, everybody wants their own Star Wars. Last Christmas, we had a Star Wars called The Force Awakens. It influenced Hollywood and influenced today's movies so much. They are still making Star Wars movies, and now you got the whole Star Wars cinematic universe coming out with Rogue One this December. But I am not plugging that film. That is not the point of my argument here. The point is that Independence Day in 1996 was Star Wars. The last two Star Trek movies were Star Wars. Fortunately, Star Trek Beyond is actually really good. But the fact is that no other film, in terms of the way Hollywood movies were made, the way they were marketed, and definitely the way they were merchandised, has had a bigger impact on modern Hollywood movies.
All right, open forum. Use the Force.
I would argue that Rocky laid the groundwork for Star Wars. That really, between Jaws, Rocky, and Star Wars, those are the three films that basically killed the 70s. That basically killed the Hollywood auteur movement. Let me put it this way. Their success, coupled with the failures of Heaven's Gate, One from the Heart, 1941, and various other expensive flops. But I think that Rocky made it okay for movies to be shamelessly uplifting at the end. And of course, Hollywood's lesson from that is all movies have to be shamelessly uplifting at the end. And so unless you're dealing with like the deepest Oscar bait, any film coming out from a studio is not going to leave you with an ending that's going to make you remotely unsatisfied.
Unless you see it at Cannes.
I want to know what planet you're living on that movies haven't had happy endings since movies existed. I mean, what just won the last round? Wizard of Oz. We always have happy endings in movies. What you're talking about with the 70s is a blip where we just suddenly didn't have happy endings for like the tiniest little window.
Even in the,
and then we got
in the
happy
40s
endings
and 50s and 60s, you could still have movies that had downbeat endings. Not
still
all of
do.
them, not consistently,
everything.
but no.
I mean, like when you ask people what they like about Rocky, they usually don't even think like, oh, well, the thing is it was a happy ending and we never get those anymore. I mean, that's crazy talk. Also, I think if we're talking about an influential movie, it's kind of telling that you barely even brought up Stallone, because Stallone had not that much influence after Rocky ever got made. He has to keep going back to the Rocky
he's
well.
beside the point.
It's
not about Stallone.
But
It's
we're
not about
looking for
Stallone's
it, but it
career.
should be. If you're picking
I'm talking
a film,
I'm talking about the
if you're
movie
thinking about a film that he
influencing other
wrote
movies.
and directed and starred
He
in,
didn't direct it. And I'm talking about movies that influenced other movies. You're talking about a movie that influenced the blip of the 70s, as you like to call it. Yes, we have Taxi Driver because of The Searchers. Yes, Spielberg and Scorsese are hooked on that movie.
I guess War of the Worlds, a movie that came out pretty recently.
Okay, fine, but that's an exception,
I swear,
not the
at
rule.
least once or twice a year, I'm in a movie theater and I'm taking notes on a film and I scribble, oh, there's that Searchers shot, because you see it over and over again. We're also talking about anti-heroes, which is in everything. Like, if we want to talk about influence, I think you guys are canceling each other out.
Absolutely
with the Jaws and Rocky and Star Wars arguments, that you're overlapping.
I'm not supporting his argument at all.
Mine is very specifically about endings, not about the whole blockbuster mentality, which is a whole separate issue.
Well, right, but the whole blockbuster mentality started with Star Wars. The whole blockbuster mentality is what's been going for the last 40 years.
Would that more current movies were ripping off The Searchers, but they're not.
Which is why the blockbuster mentality is, again, for better or worse, and I would say Alonso was going to argue worse, that it has influenced modern films.
Okay, so what do you guys think about Star Wars?
But you're both contributing to the saying that Jaws really started it. I mean, for me, Star Wars, yes, we had some space movies after that. We still do. But like before Star Wars came out, we had Forbidden Planet, the original Solaris. We had 2001.
I'm talking about the blockbuster
one of the
mentality.
First major movies that we ever saw, which we've already said the blockbuster mentality comes from like Jaws and Star Wars.
Okay.
So it's like shared.
Star Wars is the movie where studios realized the kind of returns they could get on their investment, and it made them chase that dragon every time.
And they are still doing
I granted that.
And
but I think that for what's
doing
left of medium range movies, and there are still some out there being made, they are they are yoked to this notion of an ending that lets everybody off the hook, and I think that comes out of Rocky.
Medium-range movies are a dying breed because everybody either wants the indie that is going to be a sleeper hit like Little Miss Sunshine, or they want the blockbuster. They want the maximum return. They want the movies that are not only going to sell tickets, but also going to sell Happy Meals, instead of going to sell action figures. That is what all the studios want. This is a movie that influenced not just movie making, but everything else that goes around, all the ancillaries.
I would argue that a way, though, that studios decide what movies are going to be profitable or are going to turn around those kind of numbers all comes down to making sure that A, there's an ending that leaves room for a sequel, which Rocky certainly did, and B, there's an audience that makes everybody leaving feeling elated. And it even spreads into the award season. You talk to people about how does a movie like The King's Speech beat a movie like The Social Network, because people felt good when they left The King's Speech, especially the older members of the Academy who vote for these things, than they did watching The Social Network.
Alrighty, final thoughts.
I have a couple. Okay.
And then
see, here's the problem by saying that like Star Wars launched the blockbuster ancillary market. You're right about that.
Yes.
But major studios really only release 2 to 3 each of these kind of blockbuster toy movies a year.
This whole summer has been like that.
Yeah,
Teenage
this is where
Mutant
they
Ninja Turtles,
do them. They do it
X-Men,
now. They
Captain
do it now.
America.
But we're talking about influential. It influenced this market of it that makes a lot of money, and we talk about it a lot. But influential to me means it influenced like plots in all sorts of movies, all sizes, all shapes. It influenced characters in all of it. You see it in so many shots in all different types of
And there
movies.
are
And you're
other
talking about
anti-heroes
very
besides
narrow.
John. If you're going to talk about not being the only one, there are plenty of
He's
anti-heroes.
like,
in
Star
all
Wars-
he's the major
All right,
dark
Matt,
one.
go for it.
Star Wars didn't just start all this. I mean, a lot of the characters from Star Wars, a lot of the influences in Star Wars started with Akira Kurosawa, and a lot
Buck
of the
Rogers.
characters, and Buck Rogers, and the cowboy, the rebel. I mean, those were characters that were archetypes that were around for decades, and those are archetypes that are still around to this day. But that's not what I'm talking about. The question is, what influenced modern day movies? Modern day movies encompass not just the movie, but the marketing and the merchandising. They are about the ticket sales. They're about spending big budgets to make it look better. Every studio is trying to look for like the next Star Wars and then the next Avatar. All that started with Star Wars.
Okay,
Ding!
ding. You called the ding. All right, Ken. I think I know which one your personal choice would be if it weren't based on the argument.
I have no idea. It's my R2D2 sippy cup.
And your computer as well.
Yeah, and as well. Mantz, here's $1. Go see a Star Wars. Manuel Levy in 2016 wrote an article naming The Searchers Hollywood's most influential movie. So, maybe Amy's got it. Mantz, quick pop quiz. Searchers was released 1956. What day?
What day?
All right. March 13th.
Don't ask for the day.
March 13th. We beat Mantz for one.
But Rocky was 1976. Thank you
I
very
actually
much.
didn't even know about that poll, so I love that poll confirms what I think.
Right?
No,
right?
it was a manual. It wasn't a poll. It was one guy.
One guy.
Don't get crazy.
On
by the
Twitter, Ollie Lindquist saying, I haven't seen The Searchers. Going to now. Would I trust that Amy is right? I Spark of Madness says Psycho. Revolutionized horror movies, influenced them. Brian McGrath agrees with Mann, saying Star Wars. I think he has a sippy cup as well. A lot of debate going in there. Kurosawa films coming in. A lot of older films. I mean, you guys, hashtag Movie Fights Live, are killing it with your knowledge and passion for classic fights today. And a lot of people saying The Jazz Singer because, hey, talking.
Yeah. Oh my
Never
gosh.
watched The Jazz Singer?
I am stuck on a few points. Ken, what's your opinion? Do you have one? And don't be biased. I mean, if you choose Star Wars, go for it.
I understand what Mantz is saying in terms of what modern Hollywood is, but you also got to break it down to what the films are, and The Searchers carry some weight. It's wide open, Alicia.
I know, it's really tough. But you know what? You're going to need a bigger boat, Amy, because you have another point.
Yay, Amy.
Yay. So
How do
this
I
was
lose a
tough.
Star Wars question?
I know, because I was going with Star Wars because you were saying about the merchandise, which is very true, and the fact that we have, Star Wars even today coming out every time. But then you mentioned Kurosawa, and that was influenced Star Wars a lot. And for me, just listening to the arguments, I thought Amy had the best counter arguments for everyone. But they're still all really good choices. So great movies. But yeah, I liked the way you were talking, Amy, about the shots and the moments in The Searchers that you still see everywhere today. And I definitely agree with that. Good arguments, everyone. All right, we're up to the last round. Amy's got 2 points. Alonso's got 1. Scott's got 1. So it's really between you guys to get into the speed round. good. Okay. Question 5 is, what classic movie could actually be remade well? And we're starting with you, Alonso.
Oh God, what did I say?
Logan's Run.
What?
Logan's
No, that's his.
Oh, you said Sweet Smell of Success.
Oh,
Yes.
The Sweet Smell of Success. We talked earlier about internet culture.
Yes.
Sweet Smell of Success is a movie about the sort of grim underbelly of New York columnists. Burt Lancaster plays a Walter Winchell type columnist who uses his very influential column and the power that he wields to manipulate the people around him, most specifically a hungry press agent named Sidney Falco, played by Tony Curtis. And that movie really kind of nails down the power of information, the power of the media, how people can be manipulated, how truth and events and what's hot and what's not, and what's up and what's down. It comes down to the decision making of a few people. And I think that you could do a total internet era version of this about web influencers, about the people that we don't even know are pulling the strings of the internet, who are getting the products or the songs or the whatever into the hands of the people with the hot websites and the heavily followed YouTube accounts. I think when you're looking at a remake, you have to figure out, how do I make this great movie? If I'm going to do it again, how do I make it relevant to now? And I think so often we've seen movies like that fail because they don't figure out a way to take a story from the 1940s and figure out how would you tell the same story in the 1980s, for example. And I think this is a 50s story that's so much about the media and media influencers. It's a different landscape today, but those people still exist, and I think you could tell that story really well.
Criminally underseen as well, that movie.
Yes.
Scott, go for it.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, what classic movie could actually be remade really well? I would say Star Wars, but they remade Star Wars when they did The Force Awakens. Yes, it is the truth, Ken. Eat it. But the movie I'm going for is Logan's Run. Thank you for outing me there, my friend. Now, here's why. My friend Alonso, I freaking love Alonso.
Yes.
I absolutely love this man. I really do. I love seeing him at Gelson's on Santa Monica Boulevard. But the reason I'm going with Logan's Run is because you want to talk about a movie that would be relevant now. Here is a story about obsession with youth. People are so obsessed with youth that they are willing to die by the time they are 30. That's in the film. In the actual book written by William F. Nolan, they died, I think, when they were 21. Can you fact check me on that, brother?
Oh my gosh, that's
Thank
so
you very
young.
much. But that's young, but that's what I mean. Here's a film that, for 1976, great production values, great score by Jerry Goldsmith, and it is a film that was smart, it was suspenseful, and it was sexy. And if you add those elements to all elements which would make a great movie by today's standards, but add in the fact that the obsession with youth is oh so much more relevant now than it ever was, and then you also add in the advent of social media into a film like this, but do it where Logan would be played by Michael B. Jordan, and Jessica will be played by Marilyn Monroe. Wait, excuse me, I mean Margot Robbie. Then you have a great remake of a film that would be done well, and it would be huge. It would be a blockbuster, folks.
Two good choices. Amy, go for it.
I am going with Fritz Lang's Metropolis. For people who haven't seen it, it's a science fiction movie set in the future about a society where the rich are very, very divided from the poor. And there is a leader of a rebel group who's a woman, and she starts to try to instigate revolution. But what happens is the bad guys create an evil robot version of her, and then all hell breaks loose. I mean, this sounds like a movie you would make today. It does. Like the idea of kind of a Bernie Sanders-ish revolution, trying to defeat the poor with these phenomenal visuals, led by a strong female action hero, is so cool, with robots, with everything. This movie, by the way, for Metropolis, is one of the most striking cinematic films. It has a look, if we're talking about German Expressionism, which is my favorite thing. It's absolutely my favorite thing. I want to list off like 70 German Expression movies people should go home and watch right now. But it was a highly visual film that invented a lot of special effects, miniatures. It put cameras on swings. It also helped create the landscape that we have today. And what I would love to do is I would love to see a modern version of Metropolis done in that similar version, like no CG, to show that you can do it, to show that you can make movies like this that have such a cool visual impact that you can just do it with your hands, because I feel like the pendulum is swinging just a little bit back to that. I think we're getting a little bit away from CG, I hope.
With Mad Max.
Exactly.
No,
With stuff
that
like Mad
was-
Max.
yeah.
Like a Mad Max awesome badass style of Metropolis. Oh yeah, can we just hire
Totally, yeah, there you
can
go.
you just come and do this? But yeah, I feel like the plot and the look of it would so work today. I think it'd be perfect.
It looks amazing. Okay, fight.
Here's my beef with Metropolis. A great movie, to be sure. And I would say, frankly, maybe even a better answer than sort of the previous question about movies that have bled into the modern day and that we see its influence all the time. I think if you remade Metropolis today, it would be along the lines of making the John Carter movie now, which is, John Carter may have been first when Burroughs wrote the novel about
But everyone else
superheroes
beat him
and
to the big
alien
screen.
travel and blah, blah, blah. But by the time the movie got made, it's like, well, we've seen this a million times.
Right.
I think we have people who've never seen Metropolis have seen Metropolis. They have unconsciously absorbed so much of that movie through the many other movies and music videos and just graphic design that it has inspired over the years, that I think if you went back to that well, it would feel trite. And only because the original is so striking, there's no way to go there again and not have it feel overly familiar. As for Logan's Run, I think you're kind of overselling the first movie. It's all right. It has its moments.
It's a great movie, but that's why
It is not a great. It is
it's
not
a great movie.
Let's not throw
and that is what-
great
no,
around
it is a great
this
movie.
willy-nilly.
Logan's Run is a great. I have to find anybody watching movie fights right now to tell me that Logan's
It's
Run is
fun.
not a great
It's
movie.
just
It came
fun.
out in 1976,
It's just
the
fun.
year before Star Wars. It's
In
not
any
just
event.
fun. It is, if the movie flies by
I
and you
think
talk
that
about a
it's-
film,
Its
you want
central
to-
metaphor about the age obsession stuff. You're right. It's super relevant.
Yes, it does.
But it is crazily on the nose. Like, the movie is so about that in capital letters at every moment that I think after 10 minutes the audience would sort of get up and collectively say, "Yeah, we get it,"
No,
and
they
they'd
wouldn't,
leave.
because they would be caught up by the action adventure element. They would be caught up by the character development of Logan, of Jessica, of being betrayed by your best friend.
And what do you think of these choices?
I think that Metropolis is a great film, but I actually was thinking about John Carter before you even went there, because I remember when I saw that movie, I just said, I've seen this, even though the book was first. I mean, Metropolis is great, and I love that film, and Sweet Smell of Success would be, a great for a remake, but in terms of just a movie that would sweep broad moviegoers up around the world for something that is very, very topical, which is the ridiculous obsession with youth and looking young and being thin, and returning it to the original story of making everybody die when they are 21, and having great special effects, and
morbid.
also an on-the-run action adventure. Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Well, here's my
And
problem.
Michael
with-
York in a
It's like
turtleneck.
21 small, but I love that.
No, Michael York in a turtleneck gets my thumbs up. That's fine. But here's my problem with Logan's Run. It is at its core a sci-fi teen dystopia where young people are getting killed and
Ooh,
running
yeah.
around. We have so many of those right
No
now.
more teen
Divergent, Maze Runner,
dystopias.
Hunger Games. They're starting to fail now. They're starting to make less and less
wait.
movie. I hear your point about Logan's Run, but I feel like the time to have made it would not be today. It would have been 7 years ago before this.
Logan's
blew up.
Run is not a dystopia. It is a utopia. It is a dystopia disguised as a utopia.
That's
And
what they
all of these
all
movies
are.
are.
They
The
all
Giver
are.
is a utopia, a dystopia described as a utopia.
But that is
All of
why
them are.
Logan's
They all
Run.
are.
Logan's Run. If you brought it, if you're saying, oh, it wasn't a great movie, I think it is a great movie. But if you did it post Star Wars instead of pre Star Wars, you can really take it to another level in every single way. Am
And
I running
Amy,
out of time?
you're fine. You're fine. What do you think of Sweet Smell
Well, I'm
of
just saying.
Success?
Oh, well, the thing with Sweet Smell of Success is it sounds like a great movie. Nobody's really clamoring for a remake of it. There was a Broadway musical that came out, 15 years ago. It did fine, and I think you make a good argument, but I don't think people are like hungry to really see this get remade again. I feel like
And they're hungry for Metropolis?
I think they are.
I think if you
the
know
themes in it
Metropolis,
are
you love
timeless.
Metropolis as is, and you don't need a remake.
And
And,
if
if
you
you haven't heard
timeless.
and if you haven't seen Metropolis, it's going to feel like something else. It's going to feel like old news because unknowingly you have seen a million rip-offs of Metropolis.
But
over
if you're
the
talking
years.
about a ripoff, if you talk about stories that you're saying that, oh, it's been done, this utopian dystopia has been done, well, go back to the source and do a version of it to make people go, wow, that is the source material. That is why we were seeing all these other
That
films.
would have been a great idea in 2002.
Well, it's
But
only
we're living in
2016. It's only
2016.
That ship has
It's too late.
sailed,
It is
though.
not sailed. It
Alrighty.
is not sailed.
While I think about this, Ken, what was the poll result from the last one?
It's something about a space war.
Oh,
Something
yeah.
about that. We do have the poll for this one. I'll give you that one. Logan's Run, the cutoff age was 30. Was that what you're trying to clarify, Vance?
in the
book.
movie.
In the
Yeah,
movie, it
book,
was 30.
30, but I'll look that up again here. I want to give us. I love shouting out all the people on Twitter, but I especially want to do it today because you guys are having so much fun with this discussion. So a lot of you have great choices. Morgan Robinson suggests Guess Who's Coming to Dinner because the message is still relevant today. Gabriel LaRue says Of Mice and Men because it's still relevant today. Nolan Dean says
Those have both been remade.
Birds. Igor Federico says Kiss Me Deadly. It's so fresh and crazy. I think it'd be remade in interesting ways.
Fun.
Martin Talsness says To Kill a Mockingbird. Again, Holmesy. Imagine John Ford's Wild Bunch directed by Quentin Tarantino. But the answer is from Jeff at Waffy-Ho, who says remake Brewster's Millions.
Good old Brewster's
Which
Millions.
was a remake.
That's, and a classic at
And
that.
also, point of clarification, Sam Peckinpah made The Wild Bunch, not John Ford.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Oh,
yes.
yes.
Fact-checking the fact-check.
Fact-check
Fact-checking the tweet.
Yes, and I want to point out that just because I didn't go with the answer of Star Wars doesn't mean I don't like Star Wars, so don't send me hate mail, because I know we got a lot of Star Wars
Everybody
fans
back off of Alicia.
out there. Yes, thank you. Okay, this is really hard because you all made great arguments. You know, Scott, I love the way you said it could be relevant today, the obsession with youth. That is so true. Alonso, sweet smell of success. I think that's ripe for today. As you said, you know, we're talking about the internet a lot more and people being manipulated behind the scenes. That's so fascinating. And I really hope more people see the original film as well. And Amy, I love the way you talked about Metropolis being Bernie Sanders with a robot. Like, I love that idea. I think that could be so cool. But I'm going to go with Alonso for the point because of the fact that you said to Scott that, you know, it's kind of Logan's Run has kind of been done, and you said that as well, Amy, about the utopia, dystopia, teenage drama. I also liked how Alonso then and Scott also made the point about John Carter, and then I liked what you said about your movie with the tabloids and the media today. So that's why you get the point. So Scott, you could have been a contender. Unfortunately, you don't make the speed round, but I'm trusting you to really help me with this, okay? Because I need help with judging, and no one knows classic movies as much as you do. So I need you by my side. Ken, before I forget, what was the poll result? Do you have it for that
I do.
round?
Metropolis actually won 49% to Logan's Run. 37, Sweet Smell of Success,
Populi.
14.
There you go.
Yeah,
That's
there you
great.
go.
I love this. I love talking about classic films. All right. So now we get into the speed round. This is a chance for you both to win more points. If you don't know how this works, I'm going to say a question. You give me your answer as quickly as possible. Then you each get 20 seconds to debate your particular choice. And then the other person gets 10 seconds to rebut. So 20, 20, 10, 10. And then we decide, me and Scott and Ken, based on the argument. So are you ready?
Sure, let her go first on the first one, just so I can
Let's
get a
do
feel for how
it.
this works.
Okay, yeah, I will. All right, so the question is, so you both say your answers quickly, then I'll give you a chance to see how it's done. Best Western of all time, what would you say?
Stagecoach.
Stagecoach?
I want to just argue the Searchers again, but I feel like that's terrible. Can I just argue?
Go for it.
Go for it.
Searchers.
That's your answer.
All right, Amy, we're going to go with you first, just so Alonso can see how it goes. Ken, you've got the timing, so argue the Searchers.
Okay, this is tough because we're talking about two John Ford, John Wayne rematches. These are both excellent films. But where I think The Searchers gets their edge is because it was shot in color and because he had access to better technology. I think it is also the more cinematically beautiful film of the time. And also what The Searchers has going for it is that I would say this is the launch of the first modern Western, where we're having things that don't just romanticize the past, but like question it.
All right, so Alonso, you've got 20 seconds to talk about Stagecoach.
Well, I would say, building off that if you want to talk about the classic Western, the Western with a capital W, it really all starts with Stagecoach. So many of the tropes, so many of the things that we would sort of later come to know is just inherent in the Western language begins with this movie, from the way that its ensemble is presented, from the whole notion of the forward motion and claustrophobia combined at the same time.
Okay, Amy, you've got 10 seconds to rebut Stagecoach.
It's true, Stagecoach has so many great things in it, but I think it launches a language that John Ford then carries on into the future when he makes The Searchers years later and is able to look at those tropes and say, were we really as great as we think? Are we as heroic as we
All
think?
right, rebut.
I would say that The Searchers begins an era in which we start asking hard questions about the Western and put a spin on the original, but I think you can't understand the spin until you know the original.
Ooh,
Wow.
Mantz, what are you thinking?
I'm going with Amy.
Going with Amy.
Going with Amy.
with Searchers. Ken, do you have thoughts?
I think on the rebut, Amy got it there. Close fight, these guys.
Real close fight. I know. This is a heavyweight championship of classic film fights. Woo! You all know your stuff. Okay. I'm going to agree and give the point to Amy. So
Yay.
3 points, 2 points. Alonso still in the running. Okay, question. What is Stanley Kubrick's best movie? Go.
Dr. Strangelove.
Eyes Wide Shut.
Okay, wow. Well, Dr. Strangelove is first. 20 seconds, go.
Okay, Dr. Strangelove allows Kubrick to actually indicate that he's got a sense of humor, which is fairly rarely expressed throughout the course of his films. But the layout couldn't be more gorgeous. The way that the shots are shaped. It's the beginning of him, I think, as the visual stylist that he would ultimately become. It is one of the smartest satires ever made in American cinema. One of the darkest films about the possibility of nuclear holocaust.
Go for it.
I have no idea why I said Eyes Wide Shut. Probably just because I know a lot about it because I wrote about Tom Cruise a lot. He's trying to do something really interesting there in picking a couple who we already know as being a married center of attention, him and Nicole Kidman, and trying to upend what we think of celebrity. He's doing really interesting stuff in what seems like a very bizarre sexual picture with a lot of masks.
All right. Why is yours better?
I think that while Eyes Wide Shut is a terrific movie, and I also wrote about it in my Christmas book, that if you wanted to point somebody to like Kubrick's finest work, the one movie they should look at if they want to understand Stanley Kubrick, you're going to go with Strangelove.
Okay.
Although this is the last movie. This is a movie that sent Kubrick out. You know, if we were going to see where he went in the entire arc of his career, he was going to some really strange, interesting sexual places and screwing with a lot of what we think of as movie stars.
Oh.
It killed him.
Yeah, we both have got 2 authors here. I think I know. I think I will go with Alonso, but what would you say?
I'm going to go with Alonso.
Yes, what would you say that to?
Yep, Alonso. Amy may be misfired. I don't know, but she had a lot of knowledge.
Yeah,
and
a lot of
intriguing
knowledge.
stuff.
I love Eyes Wide
She
Shut.
can rest on that.
First
but
movie I ever
I
did.
could defend the hell out of Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah,
in the
I
right
like
circumstances.
that. All right.
believe me. Yeah,
Alonso
I
gets
wish
the point. Woo. 3 and 3. Whoa.
This is close.
This is so close. Okay, ready? Next question. What is the best movie featuring Audrey Hepburn?
Breakfast at Tiffany's.
2 for the road.
Oh, all right. Amy,
guys
you're
are
up first.
Breakfast at Tiffany's comes out towards the end of Audrey Hepburn's career when she was about to give up acting, but yet it is the picture we think of. When we think of Audrey Hepburn, we think of her in that black dress, we think of her the updo, we think of her as the pearls. She was not the first choice for the role. They wanted Marilyn Monroe, but she was able to make it her own. You know, this is a movie where she takes her classy image and really changes the film and makes it, she figures out how to be like a call girl-ish with decorum.
Go for it.
From the author of Eyes Wide Shut, 2 for the Road allows Audrey Hepburn to age from an 18-year-old schoolgirl to an unhappily married woman in her early 30s. We see her make a change over the years. We keep checking in with her, so that we see her at several stages of her adult life. She and Albert Finney have a gloriously adult, complicated relationship. She cheats on him, which was nearly unheard of for an Audrey Hepburn movie.
Amy.
I just think that 2 for the Road is what we'd think of maybe 5th when we're trying to list off our favorite Audrey Hepburn movies. Like, when you think about Audrey Hepburn, Breakfast at Tiffany's is the one that comes to mind. You know, she really made that role her own. She sings Moon River in it. She turned that song into a hit.
2 for the Road deserves to be a more iconic film in her filmography because it allows her the most colors in her palette. She walked away from Givenchy and allowed herself to dress like a normal person and to dress like a trendy person. And
Mantz, what do you think?
Alonso.
Yeah, Ken?
Breakfast at Tiffany's, that's the iconic argument, and that's where I think I had it going, but that I haven't seen the other one, and now I want to because Alonso's painted a picture that I wouldn't have expected, and that kind of wins it for me.
Yeah, showing the colours in her palette is what secured it for me. Alonso gets the point.
Yeah,
4-3.
Alonso.
Still anyone's game. We've got 2 more questions here. Here comes the next one. This is a toughie. Which would you choose? Which is the better film? Godfather 1 or Godfather 2?
Godfather 1.
Godfather 2.
Okay, go Alonso.
Godfather 1 feels like a more satisfying and enclosed epic. In 2, they're going forwards and backwards, which is certainly ambitious, but I think that a lot of the character stuff is nearly satisfying, especially when they're talking about when they get into the Cuba period, whereas I think that within Godfather, everything works perfectly. It is so rich and beautifully acted and beautifully shot. It is a groundbreaking film that Godfather 2 can only ape.
Whew, go for it.
I mean, only ape are very strong words. Godfather 2 expands on this universe. Like, there's no way a Godfather 2 should have even worked, and yet it manages to take the characters that we know and put them through so many more interesting situations where the idea that a sequel could be as good as the original, it doesn't exist before Godfather 2 happens, and then all of a sudden you have this idea that sequels really work.
Okay, rebut.
If only for making the idea that sequels really work is why it's a bad thing. But no, I will admit, there's a lot that Godfather 2 does right, but in terms of being a satisfying motion picture experience, a great piece of storytelling. Coppola had it together more for 1.
I hear that, but I think 2 has a harder road to hoe, and the fact that it holds up as good as Godfather 1 does makes it the more impossible feat. It was a harder challenge, and I think it really met it.
Oh, Lordy. Mantz. Help me out here.
I feel like this doesn't support which movie that I like more, but I feel like Alonso had the stronger argument.
Okay, Ken, what's your feeling? They both made great.
I'm going to
great
split the
choices.
difference. I'm going to go with Amy here. I liked how she tackled the sequel. Should have been not as good as it should have been, and it was. I'm going to go with that argument.
Yeah, both great points. I mean, I agree that the sequel shouldn't have been as good as it was. I also like that you said it was an enclosed, standalone, almost film. It feels like an epic movie. I could go either way, but I think because you were talking about the satisfying motion picture experience, and based on the argument, I'm going with Alonso, which means you win!
Yay!
Congratulations!
Congratulations!
Oh, that's really tough, and trust me, between you 3, excellent film critics, that was like splitting hairs. What
These answers
incredible.
sucked.
No, they were so good, Mantz. Don't do that. You're so good.
I gotta know, what
Congratulations.
was the last question?
The last question was, what's a mediocre old movie that everyone thinks is great?
Ooh, Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, depends on your definition
love
of old.
Now, while you think of that, I just want to take a second to talk to everyone about Screen Junkies Central. So this is happening at San Diego Comic-Con. If you are a Plus member or you registered online, you should have gotten your email to claim your early tickets. Some tickets may still be available, and we will have a standby line for all the shows. So to get up-to-the-minute updates on tickets, shows, and what we are streaming live, head to screenjunkies.com/central. And if you are attending the party on Thursday night, make sure you update your app so we can check your digital badge for extra check-in security. It's VIPs only, guys. That means you. And a quick thanks to ShowClicks, who have been incredible. Their team have created an amazing hub for us. They took care of every ticketing concern, so thank you. We can't wait to see you all down in San Diego in just a few days. I can't believe it's here again. So congratulations to all 3 of you. We will always have movie fights, guys.
Yes, there you go.
And today I consider myself the luckiest woman on the face of the earth. I hope you guys enjoyed this classic film fights. Big thanks to Ken Napzok,
Yay,
Alonso
Ken.
Duralde, Amy Nicholson, and Scott Mantz for joining. I'm Alicia Malone. I'll see you at Comic-Con. Bye.
Every podcast we put on YouTube comes with this kick-ass graphic listing all the topics your favorite Screen Junkies podcasters are talking about. If you click the topics, you can skip around and choose your own podcast battle royale. Go ahead, try them all. If you haven't already, subscribe to Screen Junkies on YouTube to join us for future fights. Or if you prefer to listen on iTunes, click the logo to download an audio version.